to the show. My name is Mavis Robinson, and I'm here today with Eleanor Hammond. Eleanor is a longtime Bourne resident and a member of the Bourne Historical Society. Welcome, Eleanor. Thanks for being here.
I'm very glad to be here.
Thank you. So, longtime Bourne resident, how old were you when you moved to Bourne?
The first time I came to Bourne, I was 12.
12 years old?
Yeah, in 1936.
Oh, wow, 1936.
Yeah. So,
where did you come from?
At that point, I came from Palisades Park, New Jersey, which
Wow.
is where I was living.
Okay.
I'd grown up there from the age of 7.
Okay.
But I've lived in so many different places that I haven't had a hometown, so to speak.
Okay, until that, yeah. So you were 12 years old, 1936. So how did you get here? Did you drive a car, take the train?
My father had a car, my stepfather, really. But he's always been more of a father to me than any other. And he was a teacher in New York City, in the Bronx. And so he came up here and was interested in buying a summer home. He had graduated, he'd grown up in Lynn, Massachusetts, went to Boston University, and started his teaching career in Hyannis.
Okay.
That was his first job, and he loved it.
Yeah.
And he loved the Cape. So he always wanted to come back. And eventually, in 1936, he was able to buy a little cottage in the center of Monument Beach, across
nice.
from the railroad station.
Across from the railroad station. Is that cottage still there?
Yes, it is. I don't own it anymore, but it's set back from the road. It's a little brown square cottage.
Yep.
And he was very interested in plants and flowers. He was a botanist.
Yep.
And so he had a very nice garden there, which is why he bought the place when he bought 3 lots. There were supposed to be 3 lots. Now they won't divide, the town won't divide the property anymore. So those 3 lots are now one.
One large lot.
the
Right on,
house.
is it on Shore Road?
Right on Shore Road.
Okay.
Well, actually,
Which at the time was
it faces Bayview,
Okay.
but it borders Shore Road.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's where he bought the house, and he bought it from a woman in Brockton, Bertha French. And she was rather eccentric, and she couldn't do much herself, but she wanted to redecorate. And so she painted the inside of the house, but she painted only as far as she could reach.
Oh.
So she had 9-foot ceilings, and the bottom part, one room was lavender of all things. One room was Tipcott blue. The other room was a light green. But she painted only as far as she could go. So above it were the dark green stained matchboards.
She gave herself a picture rail almost.
Needless to say, that didn't last long.
Yep. Yep.
But there was no central heating. There was she did have a flush, she had a chain pull toilet off the back of the kitchen, soapstone sink, no hot water, just cold water, kerosene stove, one with the old ones that had just 3 burners in them, and then you put a little oven on top of one of the burners when you wanted an oven.
Oh, wow.
It moved.
Okay.
You just took it off when you didn't. You put it on when you wanted it.
Yeah. Sounds like a camp stove almost. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
And that's what was there.
So when you started coming here as a 12-year-old, it was summers only.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And what was Monument Beach like at that time?
Well, it hasn't changed an awful lot.
Okay.
The post office has moved so many times. It was right around the corner when we came, and then they sold it and moved around on Beach Street.
Yep.
Next to a little grocery store known as the Blue Shop.
The Blue Shop. Yep.
And they stayed there a few years, and then when the complex that's where the post office is today was built, it was started as a gasoline station.
Okay.
And eventually that was sold, and they put up the little set of stores there today. So the post office is now in that complex.
Yeah.
where a whistle stop and a hairdresser is today.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So that was so.
And there was Beach Street, but there was no Clay Pond Road.
Okay.
There was no highway.
Okay.
Which is another memory that's interesting and I've never forgotten. When we stayed here in the summer, of course, we came down for the whole summer and spent the summer. We would sit on the porch on weekends. Mm-hmm. And of course, the only road to Falmouth was through Monument Beach.
Oh, wow.
Either county or shore road.
Yep.
And both were completely clogged. People think it's bad today.
Mm-hmm.
But they started bumper to bumper up on 28, the old 28.
Mm-hmm.
That's now, I guess it's 28A or something like that. That parallels 25 and 495.
So cars would come right over the Bourne Bridge.
And it was bumper to bumper all the way.
Wow.
And all the way to Falmouth. And you just sat and watched them inch, 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 hours to get down.
You must have thought your father was pretty brilliant to get
Well,
a house so close to the bridge, right?
I learned early, you don't go out on the roads on Friday afternoon, Saturday morning.
Yep.
You stay put.
Yep. I think.
And then, of course, what was interesting was on Sunday, they all had to come back. So
right.
Everything was reversed.
Right.
And
right.
back they came.
That must have felt nice, just being able to sit back and watch it and know you'd be there.
Yeah.
All week. Yep. And did your father stay too, or did he have to
yes.
go back and forth?
No. As a teacher, he had the summers off.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And so did I eventually because I went into teaching too.
So you would pack up the car and drive up from New York and then arrive?
On weekends, yes. We came up during Easter vacation and turned on the water and everything.
Yeah.
And we came, my father had boarded in Brockton for a short time with a family of Keiths, no relation to Hastings. And that's where he had the contact with Bertha French. And we also went up and visited and stayed overnight and then came down here until he could get the water on.
How long of a drive was it to get from
New Jersey
to...
It was over 6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Actually, that's better than I expected.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it's
but
not too bad.
Some of the weather that we came up on weekends, I'll never forget the ice storm we went home in. This is on the old Merritt Parkway and before the Thruway, the New York Thruway, and 95 was built.
Yeah.
And we started the first time we came the shore route through every little town in Connecticut along the Route 1, old Route 1.
That was more than 6 hours, I imagine.
It could be. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I know that it's cut down to 5 now, at least. It's been a while since I've taken that route.
So now, at the life of a teenager, spending your summers in Monument Beach, what was it like back in the 30s? Were you going to the beach and bathing like we would today?
Yes, I went to the beach every day.
Yep.
According to the tides. Spent a lot of time in the water. I never was someone to sit on the beach. I never was comfortable sitting on the beach, but I was in the water the whole time. And of course, in those days, there were no restrictions. As a swimmer, you went anywhere. There was no marina there.
Okay.
And I never did it, but a lot of people would swim over to Mashney.
Oh, wow. That's quite
across.
Quite a swim. Yeah.
I had a friend, and what we did was to walk around all the way, take a picnic lunch, and spend the whole day on the beach where the, they call it a causeway.
The
we used to call it the dike.
Yes.
Yeah. And there were just the 2 islands, no houses or anything.
Yeah.
So we'd spend the whole day and then come back.
Yeah. And I know that that in the earlier, even before that time, those were separate islands that were not connected to the mainland.
Yeah.
Was that ever part of your knowledge of the town? Were you around when?
No, they built the canal, and they had changed it. No, they were just the 2 uninhabited islands. We didn't go on the islands because we just stayed on the beach. You didn't want to go on the islands. It was all bittersweet.
Right. Poison ivy, I hear.
Poison ivy, loaded, and not bittersweet, bullbriar.
Yeah.
The smilax that was such bad thorns.
And there wasn't a house out there.
No.
And I was reading recently that there used to be a boys' camp out on Mashney Island, but then once they built the dike, the boys would run off.
Old Dam Road.
Yes, yes. Oh, and a more famous one on Old Dam Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the one that I remember.
Yeah, yeah.
Not that we ever used Old Dam Road in those days. You didn't. It was just a dirt track.
Right. Right.
So.
Now, did you ever take the train to get here?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Yeah. I was saying to someone recently, I've been through the canal by boat. I've been on the New York boat. I've been in the local boats. I've been over the canal on the train.
Wow. What was that like?
And I've been over in the air with somebody who was trying to build up air hours with a small plane.
So tell me about the New York boat first. What was that?
Well, we were staying with my grandmother at that time in Brooklyn. And we came up to Woodstock, New Hampshire, where I had an aunt. And we spent 2 weeks with her. Well, to get there, we took the New York boat up to Boston, through the canal, had to walk over from South Station to North Station, pick up the train, and it was an overnight trip.
Yeah. On the boat?
On the boat. Would have been anyway.
Yeah.
And in those days, you didn't make it in one day.
Right.
And spent a good part of the day on the train getting up to Woodstock.
So now going through the canal back then, would it look the same as going through the canal today? How would it be different?
Well, it was different in that that would have been before the Army Corps bought the property and widened it.
Okay, yeah.
And all I remember as a young child, because I don't believe I was in school the first time we came up.
Yeah.
And so I must have been around 4 or 5, something like that. And my mother put me to bed the usual time, 7 o'clock at night, which I, of course, objected to as a child, and woke me up at 9 o'clock to be sure to see going through the canal, which was considered quite an experience in those days.
Yeah.
And, of course, we did, and I looked out and hear all these people with their cars and their lights shining on the boat and yelling and screaming, both from the boat and from the side banks of the canal.
So it was quite an event when the New York boat went through.
But I remember it seemed so close that you could almost reach out and touch it.
Yeah.
But what was interesting, after 1936, we joined the crowd on the banks of the canal.
Yep. Wow. So that's amazing. So, I mean, people would gather and make a picnic of it, or
no,
if it was 9 o'clock at night?
You just went over at 9 o'clock. That was the big event. There weren't too many things to do.
Right.
Those years, Depression years, you didn't have money and you didn't have much gas either.
Yeah.
And of course, then when the war came along, everything was rationed.
Yeah.
But and people, including my father, had a spotlight on the car, and they'd train it on the boat until the government passed a law eventually that it distracted the pilots too much.
Oh,
and they had to stop.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
But so that's basically what I remember at that time.
And so then you left Bourne as a teenager and went to college. Yep. And you were saying you went to Wheaton and then
College,
Mount Holyoke.
For my bachelor's degree in Mount Holyoke, I got my master's degree.
Yeah. And then where did you spend your time?
I spent summers waiting on table various places, including Howard Johnson's, which many people in town did.
Yep.
Including my daughters when they were old enough.
Which became Bob's Big Boy, and then IHOP, and now is the Dunkin' Donuts. Yep.
And
and during that time, did you continue to live at the cottage in Monument Beach?
No, because most of the time, until I came to Howard Johnson's, I took jobs at hotels where they gave you room and board.
Oh, okay.
As part of your salary.
Yeah.
Particularly the Northfield. That's where I went. And so when I was looking for jobs, we had friends that one of whom was a superintendent of schools. And he gave me a list of superintendents, and I wrote to all the superintendents in Massachusetts looking for a job, and ended up with one in Northfield, where I had gone to the hotel anyway during college.
Okay, yeah.
And worked.
Yeah, so that's where you sort of settled for part of your adult life.
Yes, I about, well, from 47 when I graduated to 64.
Okay.
I lived in Northfield.
And did you continue to come to Bourne in the summers, or did you?
Mostly for a week.
Okay.
Or so.
Yeah.
I did one until I was married. I came every summer. Once I came down here to Howard Johnson's, and I spent summers here. Then once I got married, I spent my summers in Northfield too, and came down just for a week at a time.
So something drew you back to the town, because
yeah, well, my parents were here, and after my mother died, I came down and took care of my father, and he had 2 children by a former marriage, and they were grown. They were both older than I. I never really knew them that well until later years. But we shared the care of my father when he could no longer care for himself. He had several strokes. So Sherman lived in Long Island. He would bring him up, and we'd meet in Lyme, Connecticut, transfer him to my car, and I took him all summer.
Oh, okay.
And then he left me in Thanksgiving to go to California with his daughter.
Oh, wow.
Spent the holidays there, then went back to Sherman's in Long Island.
Yeah, yeah.
So we
had a little system.
Yeah.
Yep. So then, when did you move back permanently? I know
when I retired.
When you retired, okay.
Yeah.
And what was that like coming back to Bourne after all those years?
Well, for 3 years, 1 year I lived alone. It was after the girls went to college. I had 2 daughters. And I didn't like it particularly, and I had joined the Business and Professional Women in Brockton. And I met a woman there that I liked, and she ended up in rather odd circumstances, and she needed a place to live. She was old enough to retire, and her boss sold the business out from under her without telling her. And she came back from a funeral to find she had no job. So I said, why don't you move in with me? And so she did, and she lived with me until she died in '96.
Okay.
And she was a great asset to Aptuxet too.
Yeah, so let's talk about that part. So you became involved with the Bourne Historical Society once you moved here.
I was
how did that
3
happen?
years later. It was because we went to a meeting of the Bourne Historical Society. I was interested because it was de Gregaria, who wrote the book on the Cape Cod wildflowers.
Oh, okay.
He was speaking, and he had slides and things. And of course, I grew up very interested in flowers.
Because your father
gardens.
had the interest. Yep.
So we went to it, and at that time they had somebody working at Aptuxet who was ill. She died 2 years later of cancer.
Oh.
And I don't know if she knew it at the time or not. But she had been working there, and they were at their wits' end because she was missing so much time and the trading post was closed. And the other thing was, because she wasn't feeling well, she stayed in the little cottage and only came out if a car came up and drove in. And of course, by the time she got down there, they had driven out again.
Yep. So it wasn't the ideal way to run that location.
No. And so they were looking for somebody, and she had indicated she wanted to leave anyway. And I didn't know, it never occurred to me, I'd never done anything like this. So I didn't think anything about it. And my friend said to me, she said, you'd be perfect for the job. Well, I was always likely to think twice before I did anything. And she went up and told them about me, and they came and approached me. And so I said, okay, I'll try it.
Yeah.
Never been there.
You had never even visited the site? No? So
No, and that's interesting because I had asked my father way back when I was a teenager,
Yeah.
what's at Eptuxet? Because we always, when we traveled a lot
Yeah.
around the country,
Yeah.
we always went to historical places. So I had been to all the well-known ones and a lot of small ones besides.
Right, right.
So I said, what's at Eptuxet? Oh, he says, there's nothing there.
Oh.
It's just an old house. So it was really eye-opening to me when I went to Eptuxet to learn what its history was.
Right, right.
And fortunately, I was thrown into a position as a teacher of having to teach anything that they didn't have a teacher for, because I taught before certification.
Okay.
So I was grandfathered.
Okay.
And so
you
anytime
could
there
do
was an
any
empty
topic.
classroom.
Yeah.
So I've taught everything from 7 through 12. And I've taught every subject except science.
Yeah. And so was the teaching an important part of your role at Eptuxet?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
because they were interested in having things for children there.
So what was one of the most interesting things that you learned in your time there about the
Well, I
place?
think it was when the realization hit me of how really this is the first time that you had a small independent company develop in the New World.
in the United
States.
the New World, which wasn't
North
the United
America,
States.
yes.
Right, right.
And then the next thing I learned was the story of wampum
The story of Wampum.
and the realization why they called it the first money system. And of course, Virginia has always claimed to have the first medium of exchange, which is basically what is the forerunner of any money system.
Okay.
But as I used to tell children, to try to teach them the difference between a medium of exchange and money. What happens when tobacco gets wet? Because their system was based on bundles of tobacco. And you can't, how much tobacco can you carry?
Right.
When you look at these little beads, the wampum.
So tell us what wampum is for anybody who might not know.
Wampum is made of the clam shell.
Okay.
And it has a purple and white on the interior.
Yeah, and you've brought some.
And I brought
with
some
you.
with me, yes. I brought this. It's not the best example I have because I had a friend paint some as a gift to my volunteers. But it does show you the purple here. And we've overfished through the years, so you don't find as many of these today.
Okay, yeah.
Which is why wampum has become fairly expensive to buy.
Yeah.
A nice piece of wampum.
And they wouldn't just trade the shell. They had a way of converting it into
They made it
a coin
into little beads.
a bead. Okay.
And it had to be, eventually it had to be a specific shape
Okay.
and size.
Okay. So it was regulated.
It became
Yeah.
regular. Not at first,
Yep.
except that the process started at Eptuxet. The Dutch were the ones who discovered the value of wampum to the Indians.
Okay.
And they could get the furs they wanted and other things they wanted from the Indians.
By trading the
by
wampum.
getting the wampum. And they had sort of gotten a monopoly on the wampum trade when they came here in 1627.
Okay.
They landed at Eptuxet. They eventually went on to Plymouth. So how much of the trade was here and how much was there, no one knows. But it started here when they landed at Eptuxet.
And Eptuxet was the sort of the perfect spot for the
It was a storing house
Yep.
for two men who were assigned here to take care of the place.
And assigned from Plymouth.
From Plymouth.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They were considered indentured servants.
Okay.
But they were trusted with being down here and living.
Yeah.
So they were here at the time the Dutch came. But the Dutch, of course, wanted furs. They knew they couldn't get the furs, but they found that they could get something else here. And believe it or not, it was tobacco.
Oh.
Not that it was grown here. They
Yeah.
did grow a certain kind of tobacco for their own ceremonies because it had religious connotations to them. But the Pilgrims were importing tobacco from Virginia, and they imported it, I found out, just to sell to the Dutch.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And why? Now, why? Because my question was,
You had to drive
why?
right by New
why
York.
would they? Why would they go to? Why would the Pilgrims go to the South to buy tobacco to sell to the Dutch?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you know your history, you know that the navigation laws went into effect. It was illegal to sell any natural product from here to any country but England, the mother country.
Oh.
So the Virginians, being loyal,
Yep.
English colonists,
They
would
wouldn't
not sell
to the Dutch.
to the Dutch, but they could sell legally to the Pilgrims.
Okay. Okay.
And so the Pilgrims bought it and resold it to the Dutch.
Uh-huh. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when I realized how important it becomes. I suppose it was just as illegal for the Plymouth people, except that at first they didn't have a charter from England.
Right. Right. Yeah. They sort of came
So
over.
they were kind of independent. Now, when they got the charter, I don't remember. I should know, but I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Yeah.
And anyway,
So it sounds like, beyond, it's not just, Uptuxet's not just an empty building. It sounds like there's a lot of
there's a lot
interesting
of history here.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we had the excavation, oh gee, when was that? I don't remember now. Maybe it was 99, somewhere in there. They felt that the foundations were not built by the Pilgrims. They might have been, but because they have found things that go back to the 1620s.
Artifacts. Yep.
Artifacts.
Yep.
So, but most of them are from 1645.
Okay.
So some people argue that it's not the Pilgrim Building, but as the lead archaeologist from Boston University said to me, she said, it doesn't matter. It's the story that's important. That
Right.
happened here,
Right.
not
Yep.
the building.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So I've continued on with the story all these years.
Yep.
And maybe it's a building, maybe it isn't.
And it's a great
It wasn't
story.
the first one anyway, because the first one was destroyed by a hurricane in 1638.
Right. So we know the Uptuxet is a reproduction, and we're going with that it's on the original foundation.
The foundations and many of the things, artifacts found there,
Yep.
are from the Pilgrim era.
Yep. And you had to come back to Bourne to learn about how interesting Bourne really had been all along.
It was an eye-opener when I began to put the two and two together and to realize what the story here was.
Yes.
And nobody knew it.
And when we look at the purple and we look at the wampum, that's where the colors of
Bourne are.
of Bourne.
That's right.
Yep. The Bourne historical colors and the Bourne High School colors as
Yep.
well. Yeah.
Yep. The
yeah.
town colors.
Yep.
Yep. Official colors.
Well, it's fascinating to learn about your personal history and
Yeah.
also your tie-in with the Bourne Historical Society. I think that you're right. The stories are what's most important, and as people, and thank you for your years of service. Now you have
Yeah.
recently retired from that job. Is that
Yeah,
true?
I worked there 23 years.
Yeah, yeah. So you've really done a lot to improve that place
Well,
and
I've
to bring
tried
those.
to.
Well, you have.
It's
You
frustrating
have.
in some ways because it's hard to get people locally to be that interested in it.
Well, maybe some people don't realize that
Yeah.
there's a building full of great stories there. And,
Yeah, there are.
Well, Eleanor, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your service to the town, and thank you for joining us as we took this glimpse into Bourne's past. We'll see you next time.